The story that I want to talk about concerns the rumored return of Ric Flair to WWE. And more specifically, the role that Ric Flair will likely be playing on television when and if he does come back to TV. PW Insider ran an item this week claiming that Flair is scheduled to go to Pittsburgh to undergo WWE medical testing in advance of signing a new deal that would see him return to TV full-time as a manager, or whatever the word of the week is, since manager apparently is a dirty word. I know Paul Heyman calls himself an advocate or an agent. Zeb Coulter, I don't know what they call him on television, so whatever they call him, it's basically a manager. They just don't like using that word. Supposedly, Flair pitched the idea of being in Dolph Ziggler's corner and kind of being his backup, his second, if you will, but that idea reportedly got shot down, and instead it looks like he will most likely be paired off with The Miz, who is back. The Miz wrestled on the European tour, which I believe has now come to an end. He's been off the last few months filming for the Marine 4. That's where Summer Rae was. She also now is back on TV. I've also seen reports that The Shield is another possibility as far as who Ric Flair could manage, although I don't know where those rumors are coming from. PW Insider, at least, is a source that I trust, and I didn't see them report that. Where do I even begin with this? First off, The Shield doesn't need a manager, okay, let alone a 65-year-old man. So if this idea had a brain, let's put a bullet in the back of its head right now, okay? No managers for The Shield. They break up, they go singles at some point, I'm sure it'll happen, and you want to make Roman Reigns, let's say, a Paul Heyman guy or something, that's fine. The idea of putting Flair with The Miz makes sense in that Flair gave him the figure 4 leg lock. You know, they've had some interaction together, although that was so long ago that most people have already forgotten about it, and it's meant nothing to The Miz. You know, if the idea was to put Flair with The Miz or have Flair endorse The Miz and help get him over that hump and get him back to a position of respectability, that got dropped pretty quick. So think about that. You know, they had Flair give him the figure 4 leg lock, and boy, that's done wonders for his career, as we've seen. What was Miz doing before he went off to film the Marine 4? He was barely on television. And when he was, he would walk down to the ring in the middle of other people's matches, and he would bitch to the announcers that guys like Santino were getting TV time and not him. And then they dropped the angle. Another angle for The Miz, seemingly dropped, out of nowhere. Nothing ever came of it. You know why? Because if they thought he could make them money, and The Miz could really be a big star, they'd have something for him. They wouldn't just throw shit at the wall to see what sticks. He got the title in 2010 because they tried to make a new star, and they wanted somebody new to work with John Cena at WrestleMania. You know, good on them for trying. But it failed. He got a cheap win, and then he lost the title a month later, and he's been a laughingstock ever since. I can't even blame The Miz for all of that. He did his best. Okay, he's good. The Miz is good. That's it, though. He's good. He's not a top guy. Okay, he's just not. Great ambassador for the company. Does PR work for them all over the world. He's been a fan since he was a little kid, just like me, right? I appreciate that. I don't hate The Miz. What I do hate is this idea that they may waste whatever value Flair has left on a guy that's never going to be above a certain level. Dolph Ziggler, on the other hand, has way more potential. We know he's a great athlete, he's got charisma, and maybe, you know what, maybe he is his own worst enemy. Maybe he does open his mouth and say things that get him into trouble. But what has he ever said in any interview that's really so awful? He talks himself up a lot, okay. Nobody likes a show-off. That's the dude's gimmick. He calls himself the show-off. He got the world title last year, then he got kicked in the head. Okay, through no fault of his own. Shit happens. He got kicked in the head, he got concussed. And like a lot of other guys, Fandango comes to mind, who it seems like they have plans for, when they get hurt and they're out for a while, they lose interest in them. Or they hold it against them in some weird way, like it's their fault. He's been booked like shit ever since he came back. He's never gotten back to that same level. And now, with there only being one championship, it's going to be a lot harder for him to get back there. But you know what? Despite how he's been booked, for some reason, people are still into Dolph Ziggler. People still cheer for the guy. They don't sit on their hands for the guy when he comes out. They chant, "Let's go, Ziggler." So why fight it? Why not try to rebuild the guy? The one knock on Ziggler, and this is my opinion, but I'm not the only one who said this, are his promos. It's a weird deal because, you know, he's a good talker, but if we're being honest here, I don't think he's a good promo guy. You know, he can be. He's got the tools to be. But a lot of times he'll talk like a mile a minute, and it's like, dude, just slow down. You know, but that's where a guy like a Ric Flair could be so effective. That's what I mean. Whatever weaknesses Ziggler may have, a guy like Flair could plug those holes in. In the ring, he's got it covered, okay? The dude's a beast in the ring. He just had a really fun brawl with Batista on SmackDown. He was out there busting his ass for a good 10, 12 minutes, whatever it was. And I don't have a chance to watch SmackDown every single week, but I knew Hogan was going to be on. I was curious what he would say, and Bo Dallas was making his debut, so I said, I'll watch SmackDown this week. And the first match I saw, I think it was the first match, was Ziggler and Batista. And it was a really, really good match. And Batista held his own, but Ziggler was in there just doing his thing, you know, working hard, busting his ass. He didn't win, but he looked good. He got a lot of offense in, a hell of a lot more offense than I would have expected. He still goes out there and busts it, you know. He doesn't need any help in the ring. He's got that covered. But with promos, him and Flair as a combo could be very entertaining, and it could be just the thing that he needs to become relevant again. Because, you know, whoever they put Ric Flair with, they're going to make it a priority, or Triple H or whoever is going to make it a priority to make sure that Flair and that person are getting an adequate amount of TV time and they're getting the exposure they need. They're not going to waste Flair on somebody. They're not going to put some mid-card jobber level guy with him. They're not going to put Zack Ryder with Ric Flair. Okay, they're going to put somebody with him who they actually think they could do something with, who's going to get time on TV, and it would be the perfect spot to use a guy like a Dolph Ziggler. Now, this is coming from somebody who doesn't think Ric Flair needs to be back on TV. Okay, you know, he talks about guys like Mick Foley overstaying their welcome in wrestling, as if that isn't the fucking pot calling the kettle black. But if they're going to bring him back and he actually wants to work with Ziggler, if that's true, doesn't that tell you that he sees something in the guy? What does that say about Dolph Ziggler standing in that company when Ric Flair asks to work with him and he gets shot down? Somebody has it out for this guy, for whatever reason. And you know what makes me really angry when I hear about shit like this? TNA. And I know, yeah, the fanboys are going to be all upset. There he goes, just piling on TNA. TNA has nothing to do with this, and yet somehow it's their fault. Here's what I mean when I bring up TNA. Had TNA not gone and fucked everything up, they could have been a real alternative to WWE. They've been around for 12 years. That's a long-ass time. Ring of Honor has actually been around slightly longer, only by a few months. 12 years is a long time. Plenty of time to establish your company, to establish an identity for your company. Okay, it may not be the 50 or 60 years that WWE, you know, they kind of have a head start on everything here. But that's a long time. They could have been something different. They could have been a real alternative to what we see for 3 hours every Monday, a lot of which isn't good either. Okay, that could have been them. Not competing with WWE, because they're never going to, but a place that had national TV exposure, which they do, for now, that had a really talented roster, and they still do, but that roster is dwindling every single week, that knew what to do with that roster, which they clearly don't, that wasn't trying to be a sugar-free version of WWE, which they try to be every single week. Okay, we're a guy like a Dolph Ziggler, and there's a million names you could put on that list. He's hardly the only one. But we're talking about Dolph here, so we'll go with him. A guy like him could look at his position and say, you know what? Fuck these guys. When my contract is up, I'm jumping ship to TNA. If these guys won't give me a fair shake and don't want to make money with me, I'll go somewhere else and make money. And maybe WWE would actually think twice, and they would work extra hard to keep the guy and actually do something with him. Now, if Ziggler's contract expires and he goes to TNA, I'm sure they'll make him champion within 6 months. But it's not going to mean a damn thing. I mean, you know, getting a certificate for having perfect attendance in elementary school means more than being the TNA champion these days. You think him going there at this point is going to make a difference? Of course not. And he's not going to make the kind of money somewhere else that he'd make in WWE. So he's kind of stuck in a way, but it would be nice. It would be nice for guys like him to have that option, and they don't. So they're stuck. So we read reports that they want Flair to manage The Miz instead of Ziggler, and you ask yourself why. What can Flair do for The Miz that he couldn't do times 10 for Dolph Ziggler? A guy people actually still react to and still care about when they've been given absolutely no reason to do so. Okay, Bob Holly, a guy who worked for 15 years for WWE. I reviewed his book on our YouTube channel a while back. It's really good. It's an honest read. I would recommend it to anybody who's looking for a wrestling book to check out. One thing he talked about in the book that I absolutely agree with, and I'm pretty sure I brought this up in my review, is this false notion that you've got to make your own push, right? You hear guys say that who have worked for WWE before. You know, guys get criticized for not stepping outside the box and doing stuff to get themselves noticed, and then when they do, what happens? What reports do you hear about? They get punished for it. I bring up Holly because he just did an interview with the Shoot Radio Show, and he said the same thing. WWE is always preaching you have to work your ass off and this and that, but at the end of the day, it's all about Vince McMahon or Triple H. It's their choice. They call the shots. And Holly went on in this interview about how he thinks Dolph Ziggler is the best talent in WWE because he still pays attention, he watches the product, and he thinks Dolph is the best thing they got. He loves the guy. He says he has everything it takes to be number one. That's just one person's view. Okay, I'm not calling Dolph Ziggler the best guy in WWE, but I would agree that he has everything it takes to be number one. Again, maybe the promos aren't there, but again, that's where a guy like Flair could be so helpful. But to go back to Holly's point, though, I love that stuff about how, you've got to make your own push. I hear Jim Ross talk about that sometimes, and it drives me nuts, because from the outside looking in, as a fan, it sounds like complete horseshit. Well, here's a guy in Bob Holly who actually worked for the company for 15 years, who was on the inside, who went through a lot of the same stuff and the same politics and all that, and he's saying the exact same thing. It's all nonsense. They pick and choose who they like and who they don't. And if you get branded a certain way, it's very hard to wash that stink off yourself. And that's their choice, whatever. It's their sandbox to play in. Okay, it's their company. But it's frustrating to watch a guy like Ziggler consistently get passed over for opportunities because the guy's really, really good. Mick Foley has been very vocal of late about a lot of things recently. He just did an interview for Jeff Jarrett's Global Force Wrestling YouTube channel, and he brought up Dolph Ziggler also. He said Ziggler is a prime example of how subjective the decision-making in WWE can be. And he said the same thing I've been saying for years and years on this podcast, which is that Dolph Ziggler is a terrible name. He's had it for so long now that I don't think it matters if you change it or not. I mean, it's been so many years. But Foley said he actually pitched this really detailed idea to WWE many years ago about how Dolph could get rid of the name and also get some mainstream publicity out of it. I guess he had this whole plan in his head drawn up, and he sent it over, but he never heard back from anybody in charge. It really is an awful name, I have to say, but it's not the name that's holding back Dolph Ziggler. It's somebody behind the scenes who has it in for the guy. You need new stars. When CM Punk walks out, when Daniel Bryan has to have neck surgery, when John Cena inevitably gets hurt again because he's 37 years old now, doing the kind of schedule he's doing, and he's not unbreakable, when that happens, you need to have new stars ready to step up and take their spot. Ziggler's a guy with tenures. He's not new, but people will buy into him as a top-level guy if you give them a reason to do so. The Miz is not that guy. Holly sees it. Foley sees it. Flair sees it. Get your head out of your ass and give the guy a shot.